Good morning. This is Mrs. Kleffman, and this is the math video number 2. I'm so glad you guys are joining me. What are we going to learn about today? Well, it's actually going to be a quick video today. This is all about rounding numbers. So you have been working on rounding numbers for several years. And the good thing about rounding numbers is once you learn it, no matter how big the number gets, it doesn't get any more complicated. It's the same process. So either you know it or you don't. So if you don't know it, then you're going to learn how to do it today. I guess the only new part is the place value that you're going to round to. So instead of just rounding to the tens or the hundreds, you're going to get up to the thousands, 10,000s, or 100,000s in 4th grade. And so as long as you know where those places are, then you can round. So we'll do that together. And then we're also just going to touch on estimating, just a touch. Not very much, just answering some questions that we've had about estimating. Okay, so why do we round in the first place? Why do we even need to know this? Well, it's actually a skill that you're going to use as an adult all the time, and you probably use it already. You just don't really think about it. You kind of do it in your head. We round numbers just to make it easier to compute in our head. So you don't always have a calculator with you. You don't always have a piece of paper and a pencil where you can actually add up every single number. And there's a lot of times you don't really even need that. You don't need the exact answer. You just need an estimated answer. So there's two things that you're going to do with rounding. You're just going to round exactly to the place value that they tell you to. And then they're going to also ask you to estimate. Estimating is a little bit more general, so we're going to talk about both of these. So here's an example of when you might want to round up to make it a lot easier. It says, I give you $15 to buy books at a bookstore. You want to purchase books that cost $4.95, $2.95, and $6.95. And you need to know, do you have enough money to buy all 3 books? Well, that's a really good and very common moment in your life when you're going to want to round up. Do you really want to go hurry up and find a piece of paper and write all these numbers down and add every single number together? 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15. 10. Do you really want to do that? No. So what you want to do in those moments when you're at a store is you just kind of estimate or you round up. So what's the closest dollar that's to $4.95? Well, that would be $5, right? What's the closest dollar amount to $2.95? It's $3. What's the closest dollar to $6.95? It's $7. And then you can quickly say 7 plus 3 is 10 plus 5 is 15. And then you would know you have enough money. Okay, so that's a really good life lesson that you're going to need to know rounding for, because you're going to do that all the time. Your moms and dads do too when they go shopping. Okay, so here's a little rounding poem that I always teach my students. It helps a lot if you've never rounded before, or if you don't have a lot of experience with it. You can kind of just try to remember this poem. So find your number, look right next door, 5 or higher, add 1 more, 4 or lower, just ignore. So let's say my number is 29,651. And I know that they want me to round to the nearest 100. Okay, so they've told me round to the nearest 100. Okay, so I'm going to find my number, which means I'm going to find the place value that they told me to round to. Find my number. So I'm going to find the number that's in the hundreds. I'm going to look right next door, and if this guy is 5 or higher, so 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, I'm going to add one more to the number that I circled. If it's 4 or lower, like 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, I'm just going to ignore that 6 and keep it the same. So in this situation, the 5, it's 5 or higher, so I'm going to add one more. Now everything to the left is going to stay exactly the same. Everything to the right is just going to zeros. Okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and try a different number. What if the number was 16,429, and I wanted you to round to the nearest 1,000? Well, I'm going to find my number. I'm going to look right next door. Is it 5 or higher? No. Is it 4 or lower? Yep. I'm going to just ignore that 6 and keep it the same. Everything to the left is going to stay. Everything to the right is going to become a 0. Okay, so that's what you do. So let's go ahead and look at some examples together. This one says round this number to the nearest 10. Oh, I'm sorry. Round this number to the nearest 10,000. Okay, remember in our small groups what we talked about is making sure that you highlight what they're some special words so you don't make the same mistake that I just made. I said round to the nearest 10. Well, it doesn't say that. It says round to the nearest 10,000. Okay, so we're going to find our number. We're going to look right next door. 5 or higher, add one more. And so it is. It's an 8. So we're going to add one to the 6. And it becomes a 7. Everything to the left is the same. Everything to the right is 0. For some reason, this is the part that students forget to do, is turn the rest to zeros. So don't forget to do that part. So there you go. 368,971 rounded to the nearest 10,000 is 370,000. All right, let's look at another example. Round to the nearest 1,000. Okay, first thing, find your number. Look right next door. 4 or less, just ignore. So since that is, the 3 is 4 or less, we're going to ignore that 5. Going to turn everything else to zeros. So 35,327 rounded to the nearest 1,000 is 35,000. Okay? All right, so now you get a chance to show what you know. These are the questions that you will find on your survey at the end. So write them down. You have 4 questions today. So write down number 1. Says round to the nearest 10. Number 2, round to the nearest 10,000. Number 3, round to the nearest 100,000. And the last one, round to the nearest 1,000. Go ahead and press pause on this video down at the bottom and press play when you're finished. Okay, so don't forget to write those answers down. Don't lose that paper that you wrote these questions down on. Okay. So now I'm just going to touch on estimating real quickly. A lot of students were struggling with this in the online school course, the Math Red course. So the problem is with rounding, they give you the exact place that they want you to round to, just like the questions we just saw. They're very specific. But then you were given a lot of questions in Unit 2 where you're estimating. And estimating is a little bit different than rounding. I mean, it's the same process, but it's not as exact. And so learning coaches, I want you to make sure you're listening to this too, because this part is for you guys. If you look in the online school, you're always going to find, if you click into the actual course, you're going to find the objectives to those lessons. And what's really important for estimating is that the students understand how to round and find friendly numbers. You can see here, K-12 uses the phrase friendly numbers, and it's really just numbers that are easier to add. So they're often multiples of 5, 10, 25, 50, 100, or 1,000. So it's just kind of like finding the nice number to that's close to it, so you can add them easier. So the problem with this is that there's really no right or wrong friendly number. Okay, and your K-12 course actually says this. It says your friendly number may be different than your student's friendly number. So you really have to pay attention if they're doing it correctly, if they're coming up with a reasonable friendly number and answering the question correctly. So sometimes they're asking you to add those friendly numbers. Sometimes the story problem is asking you to subtract those friendly numbers. So you really have to pay attention to what operation you're going to do too with those friendly numbers. So the tricky part comes when you're doing an assessment. And sometimes what you think of as a friendly number is not what they're giving you. So they're not showing you any options that you came up with on your own. So that's when you can take liberty, learning coaches, to say, you know, do it with your child, and if you know that they're getting this correct, if you know, yeah, they understand this concept, then you can mark that assessment as mastered. So, like it says here, it's not an exact answer. So if they get the concept, that's what's important. So here's, I'm going to show you 2 examples of questions that were on the checkpoints. It says the theater had 876 tickets to sell for the show. They sold 395 tickets. Which number line shows the best estimate for the number of tickets the theater has left to sell? So if I were to try to think of a friendly number, I would say, okay, that looks like really close to 900, and this looks really close to 400. So now I need to decide from this story, am I adding these 2 numbers? Am I subtracting them? What am I doing? So you really have to think about that part too. Well, the theater had 900 tickets to begin with, and then they sold 400. So how many tickets does this theater have left to sell? Okay, so that means we're going to be subtracting those numbers. So you want to start, when you're subtracting, you're going to go this way on the number line. You're going to go to the left. You're going to go backwards because your number's going to be smaller when you subtract. So you're going to find your friendly number of 900, and then you're going to bounce down the number line. And they have it written here by hundreds all the way 400 times, or 4 big jumps of 100 each to 500. So that would be the correct answer. So now some of you chose answer B because you saw, well, this is 400 and they jumped, or this is 900 and they jumped 400 times, but this one is having you add. So not only do you need to estimate correctly, you also need to understand what the story problem is telling you. So you don't want to choose that one. So C would have been the correct answer here. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on these questions, and you better believe that SOL is going to have questions like this. So you not only are they assessing to know if your students can estimate, they're assessing to know if they can comprehend a little paragraph like this. So now this one's a little bit more direct. Which number line shows the best estimation to find the difference between 5,342 and 435? So if you have two numbers like this, one is up in the thousands and one is only in the hundreds, what you can do is make friendly numbers that make it easy to, we're finding the difference, so we're going to subtract. So let's make it easy to subtract 400. So let's just make this into a number that's close in the hundreds. So we're going to just kind of make it a friendly number with the hundreds. So we're going to keep that 5,000 and then just round to the hundreds in a way that makes sense. So since that 4 is, 4 or less, just ignore. We're going to keep that 3 the same and just make that 5,300. So then B would be the correct answer here. So that makes it a little bit more accurate. So if you just did a really big friendly number and just said, okay, I'm just cutting all the hundreds and going right to 5,000, it's a little bit too drastic. So you want to try to keep it the same. So if you're in this number, you're rounding to the hundreds, then go ahead and round this number to the hundreds, if that makes sense. Okay, it makes it a little bit of a more accurate estimate. All right. All right, so we're going to do a lot more with estimating in our next video, and then that will be coming out next week. But for today, all you need to really focus on is the rounding.